Your Money and Business starts now.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Salkin. Welcome to Your Money and Business. We begin tonight with a mismatch between workers and the jobs that employers need to fill. Joining us tonight is Nicholas Wyman, author of Job U, How to Find Wealth and Success by Developing the Skills Companies Actually Need. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here.
The title of your first chapter sums up in a neat little phrase what you were talking about here, and it's people without jobs and jobs without people. What do you see?
Well, this is, what I describe as the skills gap. This is my way of describing the skills gap. This is where we have this disconnect in our labour market. People are leaving our education systems without the skills they need to get and keep a job. And we've got this large group of employers who say they can't compete nationally and globally because they can't find workers with the skills they need. What
types of skills are you talking about?
Well, particularly, we're seeing a lot of people leaving school these days without soft skills, basic skills, communication, around STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. And I think if you look at any particular, pathway like automotive, for instance, you actually need to be able to measure liquids. You need to be able to weigh things. And I think that often goes by the wayside. So it's really important that students are leaving our school systems with the right skills.
Isn't there always a certain level of what they call frictional unemployment, where there's always jobs that are posted and they may be out there for months while a company looks for just the right employee?
I think that to a certain degree, I think there's always going to be that element. But what we're really seeing now is we're in an age of globalisation and technological change. And after 140 years, the US is no longer going to be the world's largest economy. So that's going to place pressure on every business, in every community, in every part of the country. And I think that, employers really now are needing to move a lot faster in how they're reacting to changes. And I think that that's a different type of skills they're looking for.
We'll come back to the employers, but what do individuals need to do differently, particularly young people?
Well, I think you need to follow your passion. We were talking just before the segment started about young people that I see who might be changing the course of their studies so that they can reach a particular goal within their studies to get into a particular program, and then in their mid-20s they've realised that they're studying a course or they've finished a program that has nothing linked towards their passion or their interests, and that's always a recipe for disaster. So I think that it's really important that you try as much as you possibly can, particularly when you're younger, and you really see all the opportunities are out there.
To challenge that for a second, the idea of following your passion may tend to be similar to a lot of other people who are interested in the same thing, and you wind up possibly with an oversupply of people in a field where it might be more financially rewarding to go do something else.
Well, I think that's the supply and demand, and I think absolutely there's certain occupations that you certainly wouldn't want to get into. We're seeing areas where technology is really driving the way that people are ordering particular goods and services. So I think you really need to understand, are there jobs available, and, is that what you're studying for? Now, there's a whole philosophical side which people, particularly my father, a psychologist, talks to me about endlessly, about what is the purpose of education. But in the context of what we're talking about here, I'm talking about this is all aimed at getting and keeping a job. So I think you really need to understand the supply and demand.
Tell me a little about your story. I know your father was a professor, and I don't know if he thought you were going to follow in his footsteps, but he certainly wanted you to head straight to a four-year college.
Absolutely he did. And when I announced at home over the dinner table that I wanted to start in the culinary arts, I could see his face, and he was thinking, the son of a psychologist, he used some gentle persuasion to try and talk me out of it. And when that didn't work, I actually organised work experience through an employer that he knew. And it was the most soul-destroying 2 or 3 hours of my life. And I came home and said, there's absolutely no way I want to have anything to do with this kitchen caper whatsoever. But it was a friend who pulled me aside and said, I think you haven't quite got what this is all about. And I had another experience completely opposite and followed my dream, and I've been able to, cook and work around the world. So I think it's great to take on advice, and parents often give a lot of advice, and family, friends, but I think ultimately you've got to decide what's right for you.
people may be able to detect that you don't have much of a Baltimore accent. You've covered that up very nicely. With your global background, how much does this differ around the world? Do other countries match employers and employees differently than we do?
I think most countries are in a similar situation. When I say most, there are parts of Europe where there's just crazily high youth unemployment. So my people without jobs and jobs without people doesn't work. There's simply not jobs. There's 60% youth unemployment. So that's a whole nother complexity trying to create employment opportunities. But I think when we look to the UK and when we look to my home country, Australia, this labour market mismatch is something that we're seeing around the world. And as I said, it's really being driven by these two factors, globalisation and this technological change.
I had read that particularly in Europe, educational systems try to pigeonhole people at a younger age, do some tests, see how the kid is doing, and then say, you know, you're destined for the trades or you're destined for medical school. Is that more the case there than it is here? Well,
I think some of the countries that you might be talking about, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, where they've been very successful in what they describe as an apprenticeship. And here in the US, the term apprenticeship often is pigeonholed to, it might be technical trades or it might be the name of another television show. People don't actually understand what this apprenticeship thing's all about. But if you look to Switzerland and look at the people who are leaving the Swiss universities with a PhD, 60% started off in an apprenticeship or vocational track. So this idea of tracking people, you've got the ability to move between the programs rather than sort of be siloed in any one particular field or occupation. So if there was something that I'd say that, you know, the US could take from that German system, it's really important to be able to, you know, not look at these vocational pathways as pretty much, you know, heading towards a job. This is actually a career where you can continue to learn. And in my case, I still love cooking, and I was actually watching out in the room before a fantastic television cooking show, and I thought, you know, I'd love to have a television cooking show. I still have that burning passion for hospitality, but I ended up at Harvard University in executive education. So it is possible to continue to study, and it's you know, possible to continue to develop yourself.
Is the idea of encouraging apprenticeships the big takeaway from your book?
It's not just apprenticeships. I think it's all sorts of opportunities where you can earn and learn. So it's for people who might not necessarily be engaged with curriculum, be it in their secondary school. And when you see the statistics in the Metro DC area of the number of young people, you know, 16 to 19-year-olds who are leaving school, it's about 40% without the higher school certification. It's really important that I think people develop their skills and look at the opportunities that are there. And I'm certainly not saying that there is anything wrong with going to college if you know it's going to take you to a particular job or a particular vocation. But people who simply follow others and sign on to an expensive 4-year college education expecting that it's going to guarantee a job, that is definitely a pathway that's fraught with danger and debt.
There's a Baltimore program that you reference in the book called Year Up PTC Baltimore. What's that about?
Year Up's a fantastic program, and the founder's a guy called Gerald Shatavian, who I've known for about 5 or 6 years, and he has about 12 of these programs running around the country. And they're really what I describe as a bridge between school to work for people who've actually, you know, missed that transition. So here in the city, the program is really very much about intensive job skills training matched to employment, and it's linked to a community college, which is actually a first for the country.
A couple of provocative titles for blog entries on your website. One of them is the single most overlooked item that every job seeker should have on their resume. Tell me what it is.
I write a lot of provocative blogs, and it actually gets people engaging and talking to me. I think it's really, you have to be passionate, and you really have to, you know, display that to an employer. I think that if an employer is looking at your resume and they can see that you've spent a bit of time here and a bit of time there, you know, employers really want people with skills that they can transition on the front line in their businesses. So I think you really need to put your best foot forward.
Let me stop you there for a second, because, you know, I've heard this from a lot of employers that we're looking for good people, engaging people, the soft skills that you were talking about. But in terms of the specific skills that you need for this job, we're happy to train that person because we want them to learn it our way in the first place.
Look, I think that we're seeing what I describe as astute employers investing in training. You know, through the economic downturn, a lot of employers let go of their entry-level jobs thinking, well, on the other side, we're just simply going to employ those people back. The opportunity for businesses to really set aside competitive advantage. What is it that other employers are going to find hard to duplicate and replicate? And if you look to maybe the airline industry, you know, at the end of the day, they can purchase the same aircraft, they use the same airports, but one area where these businesses can really create some advantage is through human capital.
You know, the big picture in terms of one of the reasons that unemployment has remained stubbornly high in the United States for the past few years is the idea that so many jobs have been outsourced and so many jobs have been automated. What's the key for a young individual to not get caught up in that?
Well, I think you need to have two sorts of skills, and you were referring before to specific skills that you'd need to do a particular task for a particular employer. I think that's really important, but I think you also need to continually develop your own personal skills. Communication, working with others in a group. And back to Switzerland, I'm not saying Switzerland is the be-all and end-all. In Switzerland, right up until retirement, people are actually constantly developing their skills. So I think you really need to sort of, in parallel, develop this set of personal skills as well as the actual skills to do a particular job.
Nick Wyman's book is Job U, How to Find Wealth and Success by Developing the Skills that Companies Actually Need. Thank you so much for being with us.
Had a fantastic time. Thank you.